welcome to Stay in Your Lane, a recap and review podcast on Serial Experiments Lain. I am your host, Lokomasi, and with me are my co-hosts, Fafnir Masamune.
Serial, as an adjective. Of, relating to, consisting of, or arranged in a series, rank, or row. Or, alternatively, relating to or being a connection in a computer system in which the bits of a byte are transmitted sequentially over a single wire.
Alice.
If you really think about it, Lain is kind of a monophysite.
And Jenner.
Hey y'all. I guess what? I figured out a way to be even gayer. Also, I did it. That we did it, folks. We got to the 13th episode. We finished Serial Experiments Lain, and y'all, I think I love Lain. We'll talk about it.
Finally got to it.
Someone needs to.
Yes, we are covering the last episode, episode 13, Ego, or as the text-to-speech voice pronounces it, Ego.
Let go my ego!
Let go of all ego. Was the Waffles' original catchphrase. Got all corporate.
I was building models while listening to this episode, and I don't think it really hit me that it says ego until literally just now.
I don't know if that's the Japanese pronunciation or if the text-to-speech just fucked it up. Because the text-to-speech also pronounced Psyche as Pashuke, which is haha, that's funny, but then in the Japanese dub and the English dub, all the characters say Pashuke, so our episode does not start the same way that every episode of Lain starts. It starts with Lain in a staticky image. She goes to speak, but doesn't say anything. Then she says, I'm confused again. Am I here or am I there? Over there, I'm everywhere. I know that. I'm connected there after all, right? But where is the real me? Oh, right. There is no real me. I only exist inside those people who are aware of my existence. But this me that's talking right now, it's me, isn't it? This me that's talking right now, who is it? Who is me? This is one of the instances where I really prefer the English dub over the Japanese dub. Japanese Lain's delivery of Dare just doesn't... It's just not as sad as English Lain's delivery of who is me, to me at least. But I think I'm the only person that listens to both dubs, so I should probably stop talking about the differences. Because nobody else in this podcast can comment on them.
That's kind of interesting. I've been doing the subtitles, and it felt really... The subtitle Lain made me... It sounded less sad and more just kind of lost.
Yeah, it sounded confused, but I don't know how to phrase it. I feel like I've heard that delivery of Dare 1,000 times in anime and the tokusatsu shows. I don't speak Japanese, so I can't speak too well on the acting, but there was nothing about that delivery that really stood out to me. But if I remember English Lane's VA, it's Bridget Hoffman, and her delivery of the "Who is me" in this was just... First time I heard this, I heard this monologue out of context. This was the first thing I heard of Lain. Somebody uploaded a video of this playing on an old CRTV that was already pretty snowy to begin with, and it just struck to my core. It was very unsettling to watch.
No, I can definitely see that. It is a pretty unsettling little bit.
Especially if you know nothing about Lain. We then get the OP, but it's missing a certain part of it. And normally, if I understand this correctly, the OP plays before any footage from the episode plays, but this time they moved it to after the first scene of Lain.
I remember when this song came on the radio, because that's how old I am. I remember taking 14-hour-long drives from Cleveland, Ohio to Council Bluffs, Iowa, to go to a suburb of that town to visit my then girlfriend, future fiance, may she rest in peace. And this song would come on the radio 3 or 4 times on that journey, minimum.
Wow, that's kind of wild.
Yeah, I kind of commented on this in the first episode, but the music for the OP was not written for this show. The band Boa had written and released Duvet prior to this. It was the anime makers just paid for the licensing rights for it.
Mm-hmm. It's a really good song.
Excellent choice.
I do want to point out there's an acoustic version of this that shows up on another one of Boa's albums. That album is called Twilight. However, the first time I read that, I parsed it as an acoustic version of Duvet shows up on Twilight. And I thought they meant the movie.
Man, I should. I remember you telling me to check out the acoustic version too, so I should search for it and see if it's on YouTube.
I'm pretty sure it is. That's how I would have listened to it anyways.
I'm glad they showed the intro again after all this time. Because I'd only watched it at the beginning of the show. But, seeing it again after all this time, I'll probably talk about it later, but it's kind of significant.
Yeah, when I watched it, I listened to the. I didn't always watch the OP. I usually check something else while I was binging, but I would listen to the OP every single time because the version that I was watching put the OP before each episode. I think that Duvet is burned into my head a lot more than any other viewers or any other hosts of this podcast, but that's understandable. We didn't want to bog ourselves down by forcing us to watch the OP every time.
Mm-hmm. I do want to say to everyone listening, especially Lain or any other Lains out there, that that means all of us, are not Schrodinger's cats. And we do, in fact, exist, even if unobserved and unknown about. That you don't cease to exist just because people don't know that you exist. That your own awareness of yourself and your existence is enough to make you exist.
Cogito ergo sum.
Yeah, you think, therefore you are. If you breathe, Lain, you are a thought because you are breathing.
I'm glad you blew out your mic to deliver that line. I was just gonna say, Jenner's role during this episode is to deliver cryptic, vaguely threatening shit until she blows us away with another soliloquy.
I just want to say that, look, Lain, you're a bipedal, wingless mammal, and thus...
Plato's man.
Mm-hmm. Behold.
After the OP, the episode replays the last scene of last week's episode. Presumably because they spent a lot of money on the animation, so they had to amortize it across multiple episodes.
I did some research into what it would have cost to get the rights to that song back in the day. It would have been, just so we're clear, a couple $1,000s. In today money, that's several $1 million. So they wanted to get their fucking money's worth out of it.
That's a lot of money, yeah.
That's some wild inflation for it to go from a couple thousand to $1 million.
Well, intellectual property rights have only gotten more obscene. And
well, that's not inflation, though.
Well, yeah, but in terms of maybe my math was just bad. I'll get you the numbers and you can do them yourself because remember, I'm not the best at math. So it at least went. Maybe millions is just, I added a zero somewhere, and it's not. It's hundreds of thousands, right? But still, Christ, that's a lot.
Right, and if people just start charging more for non-inflation reasons, that's not...
Mm-hmm.
It's not helpful to know what it would cost to license it today.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, our first new bit of animation in this scene comes from Lain trying to calm Alice down after she's just watched God manifest in Lane's room and then be murdered by Lain. It's just God exists, and now he doesn't.
Turns out that shit's traumatic.
Yes, in Alice's panicked freakout, she manages to scratch Lain and draw blood across her face. It doesn't quite make a bloody teardrop, but that's clearly the effect they're going for.
I mean, her lip is that sort of droopy, sad mouth twitch thing that you expect in animation. It might as well be.
Lain says, I mess up everything I try to do for you, huh, Alice? Honestly, then she hugs Alice. Says, Alice, I'm sorry, Alice, I'm sorry. And then we get another title card that says, all reset, return. It's something I didn't notice until I rewatched this scene to take notes for it, or rewatched this episode to take notes for it. There's a clicking noise as the color of the return changes. So that return does not mean return to the beginning. It's the button on the keyboard return. And we get to hear Lain click it, basically. We see several scenes of this reset world. We get the outside of Lane's house, but we don't see Lain walking out. We see Lane's family eating breakfast without her. Mika is back to normal and is on a diet again. Yasuo mentions ordering computer parts and seems to be vaguely aware that something's not right. We see the route that Lane would take to school, but there's no Lane on it.
Trains are a metaphor for trains.
Yes. And then we get the OP to a completely different anime, like if this actually was a normal slice of life anime, as Jenner keeps saying.
I can't believe it was all a slice of life the whole time.
There's just, like, not annoyingly happy music, but, like, definitely upbeat and jovial music as Alice walks to class. And it's just like, this is the first episode of a completely different show. Rika and Juri catch up to Alice and say they want to go to Siberia after school. Alice says, all right, I'll let her know. Pulls out her phone, and then Juri and Rika are confused with who she's talking about. And Alice is also confused about who she's talking about. Juri says, oh, you're not bringing her along, are you? While pointing to Chisa Yamada. Juri says, we took her to Siberia once, but she didn't like it. So I guess Juri and Chisa weren't friends? Or
in this time,
maybe they're just not friends now?
They might not be friends now, or they may not be the kind of only friends off the clock kind of friends that I had growing up. I did want to talk a little bit about a couple things before we went barreling on, which is this part here really hit me hard and kind of soured me the rest of the way through. Additionally, I wanted to talk about the parents hassling the daughter, whose name I will never get right, Mika.
Sorry, I didn't mean to move that quickly.
About her diet, which you're back on your diet. It's like excessive dieting, etc., especially getting hassled, like putting yourself in a certain shape is often a symptom of bulimia, anorexia. So we got that rep for mental illness here too. Eating disorders are also like a mental illness. So we've got so much just little winks and hints towards mental illnesses in the show, even now.
I also wanted to say something that I forgot to mention. Lane's mom, she's more talkative. She's not moving like a puppet either. Like her previous animations, she was kind of moving like a robot. Now, yeah. Anyway, back to you. Her English voice acting is still a little like... Obviously, the voice actor just made that voice for the character and didn't want to change it too much. But she's still like... she's on her diet again. Like, very unenthused, but the rest of the scene is like, okay, so you have kind of a bad mom. It's not anywhere near the, like, horrible mother she was in the rest of the show.
Yeah, her bad mom is multiplied by how many kids are present.
Again, but like that constant dieting is like a symptom of that body image problems.
Well, they're not hassling her to get on the diet. They're hassling her to get off the diet.
Well, they're recognizing that the diet is even a thing. Yeah. I was talking to one of my coworkers today about putting more transgender characters in the game we're working on. Because, by the way, folks, I'm working on a game and I'm making it gay as hell. And I told them that, like, the best way to, depict a trans character in a game is to not have them sit around and talk about how trans they are all the time. But instead, to just subtly hint at it, because it doesn't play that big of a part, or it wouldn't play that big of a role in their life if fucking transphobic bigots didn't make it such a big deal. Trans people just kind of want to go about their, I can say R now, can't I? Lives, like, in peace and just let us pee. Anyway, like, just put a flag in the background. Or leave, like, show, like, their pills on the table. Right? That's it. Ta-da! Trans character. It's not even a big thing. And I feel like that's also been the approach to depicting mental illness in this show. That so many things I'm just recognizing as, wow, they really are just, like, putting, like, showing, like, representation matters in this fucking show. They're just indicating so subtly. Somebody isn't just walking up to, like, Lain isn't just walking up to people and opening up a Ramone and taking a sip and being like, hi, I have borderline personality disorder. Like, no, it's really good. So anyway, sorry, back to you.
Yeah, it just kind of baffled me that Juri, the one who was a sobbing wreck in the first episode because of how people were talking about Chisa after she passed away, now doesn't want anything to do with Chisa, and I don't know if that's like a weird thing that happened in the reset, or if like maybe that's why she was so upset because she felt like she mistreated Chisa.
When
I don't
Alice
know.
Young, oh sorry, go ahead, you first, Alice.
I mean, for all we know, it could. We could say maybe something changed in the reset, but for all we know, just because you may not want to hang out with somebody, but that doesn't mean that you want them to get bad taught after they die.
Yeah, oh, and you don't want them to be dead.
Yeah.
You just don't like them, right?
Everybody's got
I
Look, she
have
just
a
doesn't go
okay.
to the club. That's her thing.
everybody's got a
We're all
worst
about that
friend.
club life.
I will say that this is gonna be a bit of a sad Jenner story, so I'll try and keep it short, and not really, but kinda. When I was in high school, the older brother of one of my classmates died by suicide by walking onto the train tracks intentionally and waiting to get hit by a train. And it was bad. And it really affected that classmate very deeply. And I tried to console her, even though she was one of my bigger bullies. And she didn't, she had spent her entire life up until that moment complaining about that older brother and how much he sucked and how much she hated him and how she wished he was dead. But when it finally happened, she was just utterly ruined by that experience. So, just because you have these negative feelings for somebody doesn't mean you actually want that shit to happen. And getting that wish answered. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. It's just that doesn't happen very often in fiction. So
Yeah, this girl might be, Juri might have just been a bully or a hater of Chisa's who thought she was a weird girl, but still utterly destroyed that somebody died. Because it does shit to you. You go through the grieving process, and it doesn't matter what you thought about the person. That's somebody you knew that is dead now. Like I said, even in the first episode, Lane's kind of numb reaction to it is just another reaction to it. The body, you go through the grieving process in different ways, and Lain did it by disassociating from it and severing herself from it, whereas Juri just got utterly consumed by it. So, yeah.
But anyways, after that exchange, Alice says, "That's it. If you don't remember what happened, it never happened.
Ugh.
If you don't remember someone, they never existed."
Ugh.
The other students say, they say, "Alice, who are you talking about?" I have the note, "Alice, what the fuck are you talking about?" And Alice says, "Like I said, they never existed. Let's go to class."
Alice has been listening to the intros far too much.
Quite a thing to dump on these students as they go to first period.
It's I know what she means, but also in universe, what does she mean?
I mean, yeah, first of all, explain to me what she means, because I'm really upset about this. I shouted, wow, look how wrong this show is. So please, Alice, you don't have to defend her. I promise this will not be a fuck you, Alice response.
Yeah,
but
I am not defending
please
her.
explain it to me.
I'm not defending her. Her reasoning makes sense in the sense that if you were to put it into a little proof, it would work. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily good. Her thing is, if no one remembers a thing, that thing happening is the reality of that thing's happening is you can't really say anything about it if no one remembers it happens. It's a kind of if a tree falls in the forest and nobody can hear it, doesn't make a sound approach to ontology, which is totally makes sense, and is also kind of dumb. It's a kind of it's the kind of thing you think either out of a supreme ignorance / innocence, or something you think of because it's convenient. And with Alice, I kind of feel like in this new world where she doesn't know who Lain is, I don't think she knows any better, and that's not a good thing. That's kind of fucked up, actually.
This reminds me of the beginning of Chrono Cross, where you go over to the other world where Sergei goes over to the other world where he's dead, and he speaks to Lena, who in the original homeworld is his childhood friend, and she says, "Do I know you? You seem familiar," as if she did know him. It's very much that. Alice is giving me those vibes of Lain doesn't exist, and yet she, like, the idea of what Lain is familiar to her.
I mean, that, like, she started that scene by checking her email, which,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
might say, oh,
Well,
well, maybe she's thinking of Chisa, but, like, there's definitely a part of her who's like, why did I do that?
And for me, just the idea of going along with forgetting her is upsetting me a lot.
yeah, you're very willing to go after Alice for saying this, but this is what Lane has been saying in the past 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So I took it as like a way of accepting Lane's decision and the fact that Lane no longer exists by repeating what Lane told her. Because it's kind of paradoxical, because she says, if you don't remember someone, they never existed, so I will do my best to forget you, Lane, but you can't forget something on purpose.
Yeah, it's like...
And the fact that she says that clearly indicates that she still remembers Lane in some capacity.
She's trying to respect Lane's wishes, and we're going to talk about that.
Whether she wants to respect it or not, like...
Yeah, like, what an onerous on Alice. On one end, I want to be like, Alice is over a party, but on the other end, Jesus, she's a good friend, and wow, this must just... Yeah, like, just put, like, projecting myself...
A good friend.
Yeah, like, seriously, world's greatest friend, because she's seriously trying to respect Lane's wishes and what Lane has requested of her.
I'm giving you flack for friend.
Yeah. Right? Oh, yeah. Wink.
Not girlfriend.
Yeah, wink. World's greatest crush.
World's greatest cousin.
Thank you, yeah. But, like, but also, like, the suppression of herself, right, and her wants, and what she needs. Twist is really making me physically ill. Like, wow, I feel like I relate how many times I basically completely surrendered and subsumed myself for the sake of somebody else's asking, and, like, how utterly miserable and that made me, and how, like, wrecked and destroyed it made me to carry on just playing pretend with that person. Like, God, just projecting myself into Alice, I'm just like, ugh, you're too good for this world, and we're gonna talk more about it.
Too good for this world, and you're also canceled.
Yeah, and also you're canceled. You need to stand up, like, hey, listeners, you need to stand up for yourself sometimes, and your wants and your needs, and you can't always put everybody else first, because nobody else knows your wants and your needs better than you. And there are going to be times when your interests are going to go against the interests of even your most beloved friends who, will always have your back. And in that moment, if you're not on your side, who is?
The next scene is Taro and his awful friends, but they're acting like normal kids, so they're not awful anymore.
They're less awful. The awfulness has been dialed down significantly.
They're acceptable levels of awful for children.
Agreed. The kid who's, like, doing all the carrying reminds me of the I carried my VCR, or I carried my printer guy from Something Awful.
I don't know what that is, and I don't know if we have time to explain it. Taro goes to check his phone, and Lain appears on it. Also, Taro's phone is shaped like a fucking gun.
So edgy.
What the fuck is that design? I'm sorry. I'm not gonna rant about it. I'm just like, what the hell?
I like the idea of, like, in this universe, Taro is a much more normal child. He's nowhere near as, like, nihilistic and misanthropic as he is in the other universe. But he's still, like, aesthetically edgy.
Can we, for the sake of my Chrono Cross call forward, can we refer to this universe as the another universe and the original universe as the home universe?
My favorite thing about this is that on the screen, the phone says kids technology. So just to put us at ease that Taro is not fucking around with higher levels of technology. He's just using the stuff the kids should use. But he put it on a gun phone.
Is the gun phone the kids' technology?
I'm assuming it's the OS.
Here,
it's
kids
like his
have a
YouTube,
gun phone.
It's just like, oh man, I can't wait to go home and play Persona 3. Yeah, Taro seems like your voice sounded so different, you scared the shit out of me.
Sorry.
That was frightening.
Call somehow.
Yeah, I was trying to do the Persona thing. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, Taro seems like, I don't know if I would say nicer, but definitely a lot friendlier in this continuity. But the fact that he's just still aesthetically into edgy stuff is funny to me.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the phone, Taro gets a compliment on his phone from the gunman from Siberia. He's being dragged away by a small child who tells him that mom is waiting. When I watched this in the English dub, I assumed this was his daughter, but then I listened to the Japanese dub, and she's very clearly saying Oni-chan or Oni-san, I forget which, but she's saying brother.
Yeah.
So this is his sister. And I will say the only reason I recognize this guy as the Siberia guy is because I was watching the English dub, and he still sounds like Spike Spencer. I'm sorry for bringing this up every fucking time he talks. I'm just baffled that there are two Spike Spencers. Because Taro seems to be at the center of the universe at this exact moment, he also runs into Masumi Eri, who in this universe has not yet quit his job and is ranting about how much he fucking hates his job. This is my favorite one of the characters that we see in the new universe. I don't know the best way to phrase it, but it's like charming, maybe? It doesn't feel like Lain put him here because she wanted him to be stuck in a miserable job that he hates. It feels more like Lain let him go back to being a normal person and is not stuck being a weird god wannabe. Because he's probably smart enough that he could quit and do something else, just not become God. Plus, it's just funny to see somebody who is like so eloquent and so megamaniacal in all of his other scenes, just repeating, "I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna do it. I hate my job. I'm gonna quit. Those motherfuckers are gonna pay. I'm so sick of this. I'm gonna take this job and shove it by Johnny Paycheck as loud as I can. I'm gonna walk out." What were you gonna say, Alice?
God, machine broke.
Understandable. Have a nice day.
Lain is the boat in the Suez Canal of godhood.
I hope 20 years from now when people listen to this, gonna know what we're referencing.
I hope the ever-giving blocking the Suez Canal for multiple days never fades from relevance.
It's so good.
Y'all say that like the Suez Canal is not going to be unblocked is going to be not blocked in 20 years.
Have we tried pouring Drano into the Suez Canal?
We tried just coating the entire boat in KY.
Yeah. Can we just lube up the boat? Like maybe put some Crisco on the edges of the canal?
How about we get a second excavator? Jesus Christ, you guys put the world's smallest excavator on the job.
Hey, it's trying its best.
Chuck Tingle wrote a book about a man who opened up the canal by sucking the boat into his ass. But now the boat is stuck in his ass. Whoops.
We got to get back to the relevant stuff, but I love the tweet of the person that was like, imagine being the first captain to go through the Suez Canal after it's unblocked, and knowing you had the potential to do the funniest fucking thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
To be the world's funniest man.
I'm sure that this will definitely be relevant about 13 weeks from now. It's going to be an evergreen episode.
The boat's called the Ever Given.
But the company that owns it is Evergreen.
I've been hoisted. I got fucked up.
Yep, you did it.
This is what happens when you actually children.
You got owned.
Never actually. You'll get owned in the end.
My petard.
You can't get to your actually. There's a boat in the way.
The only thing that would make this funnier is if the boat was called actually. What if it was just called Canal Blocker? And you have to just say, like, no, that was just a funny thing. We didn't think this was actually going to happen. Right.
People pointed out that the way it sailed about the bay before going into the canal made a dick shape. So, yeah, I'm starting to wonder if this was an accident at all.
The last characters of the scene are Carl and Lynn, who are just phone cable repairmen. And Carl is also saying that he's going to quit, but he's talking about cigarettes. So even the Men in Black are living happier lives right now. We then cut to white text on a black background. It says, "What isn't remembered never happened. Memory is merely a record. You just need to rewrite that record." And Lain says, "Is that true?" And then we finally get it. Present day. present time. And we cut to the normal opening shots before finally getting to Lain sad and alone in cyberspace.
Welcome back to home dimension, the home world.
Another Lain appears and explains to the audience what happened. Lain erased herself from existence, and now everything's better. Isn't that what you wanted? No one hates you. Dead people's information isn't leaking out in the real world, and Lain doesn't have to be anywhere anymore.
Remember that quote
Isn't that
I
what you
recited
wanted?
like 2 episodes, Alice? This is what you wished for. This was what your first wish was. We're getting it. We're literally getting it right here, right now, Alice.
Wonderful.
Lain Prime says, you sound just like him. And Lain in the blue dress says, he doesn't exist. And even if he did, he won't want to be a god. Lain Prime says, I'm nowhere now. If I'm nowhere, who am I? And the other Lain says, you said it yourself. The wired isn't an upper layer of the real world. That's what that man was mistaken about. A network is a field to pass along information. It doesn't stay still. Networks function by passing information along. People's memories aren't just personal, they belong to the collective. You think that humans could create something that vast? The wired was just a connection. Main Lain says, where was it connected to? And alternate Lain says, do people need to know that? Look how far they've come without knowing it. You may not like what I'm saying, but I'm still Lain, aren't I? Oh right, Lain never was a person, was she? Lain is only a god now. It'd be easier if you became a god. It's easier than being human. You don't even have to do anything. You just have to watch, then no one would hate you. And if you're not happy, just reset everything. You've already done it once. The scene moves forward past this. What did you want to say? Or are you just going to make fun of me?
I was just going to say this sucks. That's it. Back to you.
Yep, it does.
I'm not
Lain
happy.
finally... Well, Lain is listening to you because she lashes out and tells the other Lain to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
The world seems to just collapse in on itself. Alternate Lain glitches out, stops reacting. For as many Lanes that are in this show, this is the Lain that like people kind of don't know which one it is because it doesn't really embody any of the other lanes. The 3 storyboarded lanes, which I think I've talked about in the past, and I might go into more. It kind of has elements from probably all 3 of them, definitely 2 of them. It's drawn at the same frame rate as Lane of the Wired, but isn't as like stern or upset as her, and is a lot like happier. But eventually, Lane's father Yasuo reaches out to Lain by appearing in the sky like Mufasa. Lain and Yasuo have tea together. Lain is wearing her kigurumi again. And I know Jenna's going to yell after I say this sentence. Yasuo says, you don't have to wear that anymore, Lain.
Grr.
Lain says, Dad, do you know everyone? And Yasuo
She actually
cuts her off
says
and
daddy, and it made me allergic, really throw up in my mouth a little bit, but do go
Well,
on.
the sub... I write this text from the subs, not because they're more accurate or anything, just because they're visual.
It's text. You can
so
see it.
I can write them easier. I can't copy and paste them, but I can write them easier if I see
I
it.
do want to say that, like, I pointed out in an earlier episode of this podcast that wearing a kigurumi like that, at least for me, is a STEM object that helps me get outside myself, and sometimes I do need it. And
Well,
so
it's clearly different for Lain.
And I don't want to say what is and isn't for Lain, but it's pretty common for people with the kind of mental illnesses that I think are being depicted through Lain to have STEM comfort objects like that. And so to say, oh, you don't need that anymore, bothers me a lot.
I'm going to finish this scene and then we can argue about it.
Mm-hmm.
Lain says, Dad, did you know everyone? And then Yasuo cuts her off and says, you love them. You love everyone, don't you, Lain? Lain starts to cry, and Yasuo says, Lain, I'll make us some really nice tea next time. And I'll bring some Madeleines. They'll go great with tea. This is a reference to Marcel Provost, but I forgot to write down what made it a reference to Marcel Provost, or who Marcel Provost was, or how to pronounce his name properly.
You mean Proust?
So, say that again?
I've always been saying it Proust in my head.
It might be Proust. I don't know. I just wrote down the guy that this is referencing.
It's
I don't even know who he is.
It's from what's it called? The Madeline is kind of this weird incidental picture in Proust of that he associates with time and the passing of time in search of lost time. It's like literally the cookie, the little French cookie thing.
Yeah.
Because like it means different things at different times. Like it keeps showing up at different stages along the character's life, as a kind of a constant that presence, but one that means something different as the character ages.
But yeah, Lain loves its obtuse references, and they had to throw out one more, even during what I consider to be the emotional climax of this episode.
I will say that, like, I was a bit harsh on Yasuo. If this is how I'm interpreting this, that Lain summons him up to comfort her in these moments. That maybe he was a better dad than I thought he was. So I'll give credence to Luca for that.
I wanted to point out that in Yasuo's previous scene, he's buying computer parts, and he seems to be aware that Lain should be there but isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's more proactive on Yasuo's part. I think he was trying to find Lain in cyberspace.
Mm.
But again, it could be Lain is just wanting somebody to talk to. And, like, she loves Alice, but the amount of times that Lain has gone to Alice for comfort and gotten comfort isn't very high. It's always backfired for one of them.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, he's not a great dad, but her dad is early on. Her dad does obviously is interested in what she wants and says and thinks in a way that basically only Alice is in the beginning. And while he kind of like falls off about halfway through, it feels right for him. Yeah, I mean, I kind of see that. Like, I can see that the computer parts thing is kind of that connection to Lain. It would feel right.
I mentioned in the first episode that the exchange between Lain and Yasuo was like super familiar to me, because it was more or less how I would talk to my dad when I was younger, and sometimes even now, because even though I'm 26 fucking years old, sometimes I just have a hard time talking to my parents, with a lot of Lain being completely silent, not knowing what to say, being too scared to say anything, and Yasuo not forcing her to say anything, but letting her know that it's okay for her to talk and that things will be fine if she does say something. And then in that scene, when Lain finally says, like, I want to get a better computer so I can talk to people online, so I was like, hell yeah, let's go. Let's fucking go, Lain. Welcome to cyberspace.
He is a dad who is very dedicated to somebody who does not exist, and that is sweet.
It's what so many bad dads in fiction are trying to be, of like a sympathetic bad dad.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, they care about their children so much and would do anything for them, except talk to them.
They'll do anything for love, but they won't do that. And now you're gonna get fucking checked on the podcast.
If I get DMCA'd from that, I'm going to send a letter to Meatloaf.
All right,
Listen here,
Meatloaf.
you little shit.
Me v
Like,
you
this
right
is what
now.
Dear Mr. Loaf.
This is what YouTube thinks you sound like.
Yeah, okay. I was unnecessarily harsh to Yasuo, but I will again restate, the bar for bad daddom is pretty fucking low, and he crosses it, but that's the extent to which he crosses it still isn't really well reflected on him, but I will give him points for trying.
Yeah,
He's
I mean,
he's making an attempt, and that really does count a lot. Like, I really am. I'm giving him an A for effort.
I just kind of have to say, like, I can't really fault him for not knowing how to handle his child becoming God.
Yeah, I mean,
Who
like,
the hell is prepared for that?
Who even knows how to be a parent? I talked about this in that episode. Like, no, every parent, speaking as a parent, we're all fucking winging it. We have no fucking idea what we're doing.
He does kind of fall off out of her life a bit in the middle, but like I always found it interesting though when he does that. It's interesting to me how much he seems almost more lost than she does. Like, we see it first from her perspective, where he is weirdly cold to her, and then we see it from his perspective, where he has completely lost Lain and has no idea how to communicate with this strange child connecting herself to the internet and like becoming a god in the corner of her weird room. It's it's one of those things where like he's not a good dad, but the way that he sucks is very different from the way that a lot of bad father figures suck.
I agree. Though he does suck in many ways, bad father figures suck too. But again,
Yeah.
still giving him that AA for effort, still recognizing a man who is genuinely seems to be trying and genuinely seems despairing in his own powerlessness and lack of ability to even comprehend what's going on. And this is kind of something that I, as a parent, also relate to, and that, like, my mom tried to express to me pretty recently, which is that your kid is going through so much shit at the onset of puberty and whatever, and especially like in this period where all of you, by the way, were babies, where your kid is suddenly just getting into this strange new thing that you don't even understand, the internet, and you're just losing them. Like, even when it's something more understandable, like hard drugs, right, or something like that, it's still like, suddenly your kid is a teenager and they're like hiding in their room, for 14 hours a day and only coming down to like eat and barely speaking a word to you, and you just feel completely disconnected. And what happened to your little girl? Like, yeah, like this is really touching on those feelings of the powerlessness and the inability to even reach out to your child, even if you had a good relationship, which they really didn't. But yeah, just now, like, now what? Like, how do I even reach them? Yeah. I think this is really tapping into that. But yeah, back to you. Sorry.
I'm scared of opening the floodgates, but I think the purpose, like, the reason that Yasuo says you don't have to wear that anymore, Lain, is he doesn't say you shouldn't wear that anymore. He says you don't have to.
He's presenting her an option, yeah.
Whether he's right or not, I think the way that he views it is that, like, Lain is wearing something with a hood so she can hide behind the hood.
Mm-hmm.
She's wearing something that looks cute to try and like draw attention away from herself into the cute outfit that she's wearing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is basically, it's basically Yasuo saying like, Lain, we're not both adults, but you are God, so you're an honorary adult. Like, we can talk. I don't want to say as equals because she's fucking God, but like we can talk like colleagues. Like, we can talk with mutual respect. You don't have to hang on every word that I say, and I don't have to act like I'm telling you the right thing to do in every single situation.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if that is the interpretation that you're applying, it's not the interpretation I have, and I appreciate you bringing that interpretation to my attention, because like that's how I approach parenting with the whelps that I have. Right? Is I just present them certain options. Right? Like, you don't need to be doing XYZ, right? Like, you don't need to be doing all these chores if your parents are just going to be treating you like garbage or whatever. So, like, if that's the intent, is just to kind of present the option of, hey, just so you know, like, you don't need to be doing this, you don't need to be putting up this front, then that's fine. I, again, was projecting a bit too much bad dad onto him. But if the intent was just to, hey, I'm here as an equal, treating you like an adult, recognizing that you're you're going through puberty, blossoming into adulthood, literally God, by the way, as something like an equal, to just kind of lay out, hey, you've got options, then yeah, I respect that.
I also just really appreciate Yasuo doing the things that all good dads should do and make something that seems complex as simple as it possibly can be. Lain trying to figure out like how to talk about her feelings towards humanity as a whole, and Yasuo was just like, "Well, you love them, right?"
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's kind of obvious, and Lain immediately starts crying.
It's kind of like I've done this a couple times with my kids again, like really relating to Yasuo in this scene. Where like one of my kids will come to me and be like, I've got like this thing, and I'm like, well, you're gay, right? And then like they're like, God damn it, like you completely beat me to coming out, and they start crying, like, well, pat, I'm here, it's okay, right? It's good, it's a good thing.
This also kind of reminds me. I never had to have this done because I was a boring child, but the one like thing that good dads do is that your child is going to fuck up. They're going to wreck a car. They're going to like get drunk at a party when they shouldn't and need somebody to drive them home. And they're going to need your help. And you're going to help them, and you're not going to give them any shit until the next day. Like, while you're helping them, you're helping them. And you don't say anything. You don't lecture them from like a detached viewpoint. Like, you need to give them a reason to think that you actually care about them. And you do that by focusing on helping them at first.
Yeah.
And then you lecture them to make sure that they don't do anything stupid again, which is kind of a losing battle. That's when you gotta fight.
Yeah, I'm gonna dunk on you a little here, Loka, but I just want you to
Great.
know that I was talking about how representation matters and how like the diversity of experiences and voices we have on this podcast was actually really good before we started recording. I was recognizing how like Alice is really here with the philosophy and theology, and I have like a bit of theology, but I'm mostly here with like the knowledge of psychology and trauma and mental illness and loss and stuff like that, right? And Fefner's here to just like know about art and be cool and shit. And then like you're here, Loka, as the good dad haver. It's you. You're repping the good dad havers. You're here to point out, hey, this dad, not bad. And that's like a crucial insight to have because I can't speak for anybody else in this podcast, but my dad sucked. So I'm projecting all kinds of fuck this dad. Like, I don't know about the rest of you, but like I see a dad in media and I instantly hate that dad until that dad proves that they are like the most like best dad because I just have an immediate distrust of dads in anime and media, period. And I mean, do you blame me? How many storylines in anime and media has the dad and the dad is like secretly evil all along? I mean, come on.
Somebody's got to know what it looks like when a parental figure or a father figure is good. Because it kind of reminds me of that sort of like that weird quote from the War and Peace guy.
You can just call him the War and Peace guy.
I'm gonna remember this later.
Google it.
I want to die. Anyway, like he has the whole every troubled family is kind of similar in its troubledness, but every happy family is sort of unique in its happiness, and kind of this idea of like we know what it looks like when things are wrong here, but what it looks like when things are doing really well for a lot of people is just a mystery. So it is kind of good to have some insight in media and otherwise of what does this look like when it's good actually.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciate Marimo. I appreciate this, Loka. Like you like pointing this out, and I'm sorry, like my brain is a little scattered. I just like I appreciate this insight, and like I wanted to point out. I'm talking a lot about parenthood. That representate like one of the reasons why it's so difficult to even know how to be a good parent is representations of actual good parents in media is incredibly rare. That's all.
Yeah. Also, Alice, looks like you figured it out. I was going to tell you it's Leo Tolstoy.
Forgetting Leo Tolstoy's name, as I literally deserve to get gulagged for this. I will never recover.
No! I will defend you
Jesus
from the
Christ,
gulag.
Alice. There's so many names, you can't remember them all.
Yeah.
Send
What
me
are you,
the second
Wikipedia?
A free online encyclopedia that anyone can edit.
Hey, I have a different joke. P is stored in the Wikipedia.
Boo.
Alright. Fefner, if you have anything to say, you can say it, but otherwise I'm going to move past this scene.
Well, I have more to
This
say
is
if
what
Fefner
Peak
doesn't.
Dad looks like.
Yeah, this is what peak dad looks like. You may not like it. Like, no, this is emblematic of good parenting, and I wanted to thank you, Luca, for helping point it out and like being here to recognize it. And we see so little of this. But
Yeah, like no parent's going to have all the answers.
yeah,
That's just impossible. Like all they can do is be there and try not to fuck things up worse, which I really don't think the Yasuo made things worse than they were going to.
yeah, be there and do their best. That's what my goal is. If you can get that kid out of that situation, not worse off than they already were, then congratulations. Here's your blue ribbon.
I don't want to go too much into the Lain video game, but Lane's dad in that is in a completely different situation. He actually leaves very early on in the game because he divorces Lane's mom, who is less shitty in the video game. And most of Lane's motivation in the game is to try and get him back in some way. But it's weird. Like this is probably the best dad that Lain has between the two.
Yeah. I will say that, like, one of the things that I did, like, one of my interpretations, and then we can move on, sorry, this is going to be a bit of a long episode, is that this is actually a grieving process. See, when you suffer, human beings in general go through grief, period, through big dramatic changes, even small changes, big upheavals in our lives, we grieve. And there are 5 stages to grieving. And right now, Lain just had a really big upheaval where she literally unexisted herself. And her dad either sought her out or she brought him in. I'm sure there was actually a bit of a mutuality here, because if God doesn't want to be found, you're not going to find God. So, Yasuo seeking out a way to get in contact with her, and then her allowing herself to get contacted is part of this process. And whether or not this is actually happening, or if, to what extent this is actually happening, I'm not sure. But I view this as part of that process, of that grieving process, of going through the grief of, I don't exist. Is one of the ways I interpreted this. Is it valid? Shrug. My headcanon is shit. It's just, I see this as kind of going through the bargaining stage of grief, where it's just like, is this okay? What am I? Just kind of talking yourself through it before you get to the stages of, the later stages of acceptance, etc.
So last scene of the episode, we get to see Alice as an adult. She is talking with her boyfriend, discussing moving into a new place. She's talking about all the... she wants to pick out the curtains, and her boyfriend says, you can pick out everything, it's totally fine. Alice says that's a good student, and I hope that she didn't mean that literally. I hope she's just being funny about the fact that she teaches.
I pointed out that sometimes in translations, especially in this time, that Kohai Senpai was often translated to student teacher. So there's a chance that it's not that this guy is literally her student, but that this guy is her Kohai, that she's a manager and he's like a sub-manager, or she just has a higher position or a higher rank or a higher age than him and calls him Kohai instead of Senpai. That's the inverse.
Sayonji,
yeah.
Classmate.
Yeah. She's just but it's been translated into...
I didn't play the line over and over again to hear Kohai. I don't remember hearing Kohai, but I may have just lost it in the sentence.
I don't know. I don't want to listen to it either, but my point is that I would rather believe that, right?
Yeah, and we learn later, Alice is only a student teacher and she teaches elementary age children. It's highly doubtful that she is teaching somebody this guy's age.
Yeah.
Because she sees Lain and goes to talk to her, asks if they met before, and says, did you go to the school that I'm student teaching at? And then goes, no, I don't think that's where you were from.
She's so
and
happy to see Lain.
Yeah, and Lain's happy to see her.
It just breaks my heart how happy she is.
Lain says, pleased to meet you. We haven't met before. They have a quick exchange. I like Alice giving her name, because in the Japanese dub she says that her name is strange, but in English she says that it's normal.
No, she dunks on her name quite a bit, and I was like, how dare you? Alice is a magnificent name. But only the coolest people on Earth would be named Alice.
I just like that the dubbers clearly thought, well, she can't say that Alice is weird. It's a perfectly normal name in English. We know this is happening in Japan, and this isn't a cultural thing that's going to be lost on the U.S. audience. This is a weird thing to bring up, but one change that was made during an English translation they later went back on, that I think the change was kind of necessary. In Yakuza 1, there is a mission where Kiryu is almost hoisted by a woman drugging him while being hot and having huge boobs. And the name of that mission in Japanese is Price of an F Cup. In America, they changed that to D cup because the breast measurements are different across countries. And I think that was necessary because an American audience doesn't necessarily know that the breast measurements are different across countries. And even if they did, when they see F cup, they're going to think American F cup. They're not going to instinctively think to change it to Japanese. It's different when you're talking about names. We know Alice isn't a Japanese name. Maybe I'm speaking with authority that I don't have, but I really think they could have kept the line the same.
Hold on,
it doesn't ruin the scene.
Didn't you say in the very beginning that they intentionally wanted people to create linguistic confusion?
I did.
Do you think
this
might be it?
But I don't know if they could...
It's just one
Maybe
more way that
this is the most boring fucking fight.
Obviously, it's less of a this one's supposed to be a fight and more of a there have been a lot of things where there's been this tiny, weird little difference. And I wonder if these are together supposed to add up to helping to create that linguistic confusion of what the fuck is happening. And make people struggle towards understanding it across these lines. I mean, you do stuff like this enough times, and you start making a thing trademark capitalized.
Yeah, I can definitely believe that. It's just strange to me that like this was apparently the mission goal for at least one of the executives in charge of the series.
I have two
And
questions.
it just comes down to things like, oh, Alice is a normal name in America, but a weird name in Japan.
I have one statement and two questions. Question
All right,
one.
we'll go before you start adding
Is
more.
this fucking Steve Bloom?
I didn't double check, but I don't think I have to. I would recognize Steve Bloom's voice in most places. Yeah, Alice's boyfriend is Steve Bloom. Bloom definitely did voice work for this series. I misremembered him as being a newscaster, but there was definitely when I was watching this dub the first time, I heard his voice and was just like, yes, Steve Bloom is here,
We got it, folks. Okay, my second question
ladies and
is...
gentlemen, we got him.
Alice, as the foremost expert on Alice's. Alice of the show could have done way worse than Steve Bloom, I guess. Yeah?
I can't say that it's the best that she could have done, but there are significantly worse people.
Yeah, I mean, she could have done, like, Vic Magnolia, which, come on, yeah.
There's not even an L in his last name. I know you don't care.
I don't
but
fucking care to pronounce his name correctly.
What?
just call him
You
Fuckface.
mean
Yeah.
Vic Banana?
Is that how his name is really pronounced?
Vic Mongoose.
Vic Steiny.
Vic Mangoose?
Vic Sexpest, I believe.
But yeah, like, I
Because
gotta,
Vic, the world would be better off without him.
I gotta say that, you know, if it had to be Steve Bloom, I would have. If we were going Steve's, I would have preferred Steve Conte, but Steve Bloom is fine.
Yeah. We'll draw out your full Alice opinions during the segment at the end, but yeah. And then my statement is, I did want to say, like, this is kind of funny, like, that a lot of people with, like, small busts will, like, go, oh, yes, your life is so hurt, the tragedy of your D cup breasts, or whatever, your double F cup breasts, and the crushing weight, look at them blocking the Suez Canal, your enormous tits, and it's just like, actually, it is kind of a huge issue to have big breasts. It really does, it can cause, like, all sorts of, like, health issues and back pain and, like, throw out your back and mess with your posture and all sorts of shit to have huge breasts. But I just remember when I was going through puberty and got big boobies at a very young age, it was one of the few times that my peers actually treated me with any kind of interest, because I'd be like, God, this sucks. And the other girls who did not have enormous titties at a very young age would be like, yeah, it sure does suck to have enormous titties. And I'm like, no, it really does. Anyway, back to you.
Let's see. Lain has a conversation by saying, I wrote down exactly what she says, but I actually didn't lead into this very well, because she says, you're right. I don't know what she says that in response to. we can see each other anytime. I'm here, so I'll be with you forever. Alice and her boyfriend walk off. The boyfriend is friendly to Lain, says goodbye to Lain, mentions her name, which is a big deal with children. They love hearing people say their name.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, yeah, overall I like this boyfriend. He's definitely better than the fucking pedophile teacher.
I will say that, like, their interaction, like, is way more jovial. The bickering that they're having is pretty, tame.
I wouldn't even call it
It's just-
bickering,
Yeah, it's
because
not
like
even
Alice
really
is saying,
bickering.
like
It's just kind of banter, I guess.
Alice is saying, I would have done this way, and her boyfriend's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I would have liked it if Alice ended up with Lain, but you can't really have a healthy relationship like that with God. So
I literally talked about this, how, like, the power imbalance of dating God is going to be really problematic.
we're done with the episodes. We can move on to more like general episode discussions. I feel like this was the only way the series could have ended, with Lain removing herself from like interacting with humanity on the whole.
I mean, she
Because, like
could have
you said,
removed.
Jenner.
She could have removed the part of her that was like the God part of her, but it was either going to be she had to leave the situation, or that part of her had to change. So
And then we just be
thematically.
back to the beginning of the series.
Yeah. I'm not sure that I like this version of it, but I can't say that it doesn't follow. I am grudgingly accepting.
Go. You're about to use an argument that I made against me, so go ahead.
Like, well, you were saying, like, how can you have a relationship with God? And you meant romantic, but, like, how can you have any personal relationship with God? You can't be buddies with God.
I mean, a lot of faithful people do have a personal relationship with God. I don't know how it
But
works,
God doesn't
but
talk
like,
back.
yeah, I
It's
hopefully,
not like you can just
hopefully
go to the
not.
bar
I
and
don't
see
know.
God hanging out there.
Maybe he does. I can't speak for them. Instead, I'm going to talk to you about Lunar the Silver Star.
The other video game that you played.
So, at the end of Lunar the Silver Star, it is strongly implied, and it is more heavily implied, in fact, outright stated in the remake, the worst remake, Lunar Silver Star Story Complete, that Luna, who is the avatar of the goddess Athena, gives up her divinity to just stay on Earth as a human and live out her life as a mortal with her beloved Alex, who is the Dragon Master, the main character of that game. Spoilers, by the way, for a game that is over 30 fucking years old.
Portrayed by a slice of white bread.
Yeah.
Alex is.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's not. This isn't something that Lain couldn't do. Like, she could totally just give up her divinity and be immortal and live out her life.
I mean, it could just work completely different from one media to another.
If you're God, you have you have unlimited power to do whatever the fuck you want, and in this essay, I will.
Could God make a boulder so big that he could not lift it?
Yeah, exactly, Fefner.
I mean, we also...
I was saying that at you, Jenner.
Sure.
We also...
That's a paradox.
We also
if they wanted to.
We also used the word God a little loosely, partially as a joke, but also the exact limits of what Lain is and can and cannot do, we don't know. And we're kind of supposed to understand the show without knowing those nitty-gritty. It's possible that she literally can't. That anything she does will inevitably lead her back here. We don't know that, but it's possible. It's also possible that Lain herself may not... She wants to do right by Alice, and she loves Alice. But that doesn't mean that she necessarily wants to return to the kind of life she had before. There's a lot we don't know. And whether or not, except that, the one thing we do know, which we're all kind of already know, is that she could not be with Alice and stay with Alice the way she was. Not as Lain, the godlike internet being who can change reality on a whim and sometimes does so without asking first.
So, I want to go back to another media that I mentioned earlier in this podcast, the Infinity Gauntlet miniseries. I mentioned that series ends with the character Adam Warlock gaining the Infinity Gauntlet and with it the power of a god and refusing to give it up. And one of the exchanges that I liked is that the other heroes, I want to say Thor, but it might be Doctor Strange or one of the other ones, is trying to talk Adam out of it to give the gauntlet back up. And he says, like, you don't have the right to have that power. And Adam says, does it really bother you so much that all the random occurrences that used to happen for no reason might now happen for an actual reason, that they might be controlled by a consciousness instead of occurring at random? Does that really bother you so much? And, like, the point of that exchange is that Adam really does think that he can do the right thing while having the power of a god. And so much fiction is about people giving up that power, and even Infinity Gauntlet kind of implies that, like, you're better off not having that power. But it's totally possible that Lain would rather be a god than be a human.
Maybe.
She doesn't like the fact that she has to give up being a human to do it. And it kind of bothers her that there is this weird paradox of, like, oh, I'm a god, I can do anything except these things. Like, why are there any limits if I literally ascended to godhood?
Yeah, I mean,
why do I still have to make decisions?
If she makes the rules, then yeah, exactly. It can be whatever way she wants it to be, and the fact that she struggles with this will be something to bang her heads against for a very long time. I think that
And I also
the
think that, like,
mortal understanding of the divine is incredibly limited because we can really only anthropomorphize the idea of God to a certain extent, to a certain amount. And, like, the idea of something non-divine, understanding the whole of what is and isn't divine, is probably impossible. Unless you're a god yourself, you're probably not going to really get the full scope of what is and is not the full spectrum of God, and even then, you'd only have like your taste. And it's very much the same way, like as a person, right? As a person, but just God is on that next scale, right? Yeah.
Just like how an amoeba could never understand a human, the human could never understand a god.
Yeah.
It's bothering me now that so many people don't get the point of that speech in Akira.
Yeah.
It's not figure out if you listen to it more than once.
Yep. It's very much that, like, any given...
I figured it out when I was 17. Fuck all y'all.
I could spend my entire life, all of us can spend our entire life studying psychology, astrology, philosophy, etc., to try to understand people. But at the end of the day, the only person you'll really ever fully understand, and that's if you're lucky, is yourself, and you will never become an expert on humanity, no matter how many PhDs you get in social sciences. And the same could be said of the divine, of gods. It's just as much of a folly to get any kind of understanding of what truly encompasses the whole of God. And so whatever Lain is working with here is her own understanding of what she can and cannot do. And I suspect that over time, as she matures and grows and comes into being, understanding herself, right, as she goes through literal puberty and everything else that she's going through and just kind of processes it, she'll become more aware of just how, like, what her limits really are and the full extent of what she wants, etc., because I would like to believe that she's going to continue to go through that grieving process and continue to go through the Maslow's hierarchy, self-actualize, etc., figure herself out, and realize what she can and cannot do and who she is and isn't. And I want that for her. I hope she continues to have these discussions with Yasuo, with Alice, with other people in her life. And I decided, against all odds, to take a positive message from the end of the show in spite of it. We're going to talk about my headcanon.
I'm sorry, hearing you say, like, hopes to have these further discussions with Yasuo just made me realize Yasuo was Lane's prophet.
Yeah.
I somehow didn't think about it like that. And the idea that, like, Yasuo is Lane's prophet, but he's not here to spread the word of Lain. He's here to be Lane's counselor.
He's here to help Lain, and that's one of the older... I talked to you about Shintoism, like the older pagan religions, like Ramuva, another pagan religion that I'm very familiar with because one of my ancestors were of that faith. Your deities were your ancestors. You walked and traveled alongside them. They were your companions as well as deities. They had this dual role in your life. And you helped them figure themselves out just as much as they helped you figure yourself out. In more pagan religions like Shinto and like older pagan faiths in Japan that predate Shinto, that was more the relationship that mortal had with the divine.
Yeah, I'm glad you know things about more religions than I do.
Well, like, Alice studied just Christian theology, but haha, Alice, I studied anthropology, suck my dick.
I was gonna say I just had the probably fairly tepid take of, like, this is a weird...
Why did I get so hostile? I'm sorry, Alice.
I was stuck between, should I return this hostility as a joke, or should I try to twist it into something terrible? And I got stuck between all my options that were so good that I couldn't come up with it.
Hey, Alice, can you cry on command? That would have been the best thing to do. That would have obliterated her.
I wanted to. I really did, and then I just couldn't. I sat there, was like, God damn it.
I'm sorry.
Just turn your webcam on as a single tear rolls down your face.
I'm sorry. Why did I get so hostile? You were gonna say something. I hope I didn't derail you.
No, I remember what I was gonna say. I wrote it down.
Okay.
I was probably a fairly lukewarm take of, like, I see Lain as very similar to Jesus. Yeah, go ahead, laugh.
That's fine.
mostly in the sense of like the interpretation that Jesus isn't, a biological child of God, because that's just not how God operates, but rather like a version of God that was sent to live with humans and then return to heaven to help God understand humans better.
Yeah.
Because that's like Lane's thing. Like she lives as a human, she understands humans, she goes back to heaven, which in this world is cyberspace,
Mm-hmm.
and is able to be a better God and give humans better lives because she understands them better.
And yeah, I will say that like drawing from your own background to apply it to your understanding of things is completely valid. So your Christian background, like applying that to understanding that, is completely valid, and I agree. I would say like that's kind of the take that Lunar has too. Like one of the takes is that the reason that Athena reincarnates as a human is to learn from humans how to be a better god and and to teach humans how to be better people. And the inverse, right? So humans, humans learn
That's
more about God, and God learns more about people.
I mean, that's not entirely foreign to Shinto either.
Yeah, it's not entirely
sometimes
foreign
the
to
gods
Shinto.
come down and rough it with us. Sometimes just because they're bored, but also sometimes because they get kicked out for something, or they whatever reason is to contrive it, but they come chill with us and they understand us a little better. It's
In Shintoism, there are many myths of gods coming down and being the romantic partner of mortals. But even in those legends, they either uplift the mortal to be a god like them, because even Shinto understood that power balance is not okay, or they eschew their godhood until their mortal partner dies.
yeah.
Right? At least until their mortal partner dies, and then sometimes they have to undergo an entire ordeal to reclaim their divinity. But yeah, so I would say that like that's the role that is like that's one of the influences that is going on here. It probably, that's my hypothesis, is this understanding of God as as also I guess a social construct, the social construct of God, the self of God. Xenogears went into this a bit too, if any of you have played Xenogears. If you have not, I've mentioned 3 old games now, so I think I'm at my limit. I think I've reached my quota.
I started Xenogears back when I was in college, and then I just stopped playing it for some reason. I liked it. I liked the idea of what it was going for. I like that it's a weird sort of Gnosticism-inspired story, because you don't get a whole lot of those. I should go back and play it because I like weird. I don't want to use the word pretentious because I don't think it's pretending to be anything that it's not, but I like weird stories like that try to tackle massive.
We should just like get BizTalk
massive
together
tellings.
and go through it together like we did Lunar, right?
Well, I still owe you Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah, let's do this first, and then we'll finish Final Fantasy Tactics. Regardless, yeah, I don't want to clog up too much of this. I just wanted to say that one thing, which is that this is very much like drawing from that background of understanding like Buddhism, Shintoism, etc. Like even in Buddhism and Confucianism as well, the divine would often interact with mortals and like become their companions, learn from them, right, and teach them themselves. There are many Buddhist stories of like the Buddha actually learning from the dumb person, like the dumb mortal, right, and being like, oh geez, this mortal was the actual wise one, right? Yeah. There's one myth that I remember reading of Confucius himself basically getting clowned down by a Kirin and being like, okay, fine. It's really good.
I mean, like one of the first interactions in the Old Testament between God and people that aren't Adam and Eve is Abraham arguing with God over whether or not to destroy a city, and Abraham wins that argument.
Yeah.
It's so weird to me that like the Bible starts with God creating the world, the universe, and everything, and then immediately loses an argument.
I am going to reference an old song, but another song that was very popular in this day when Duvet was also playing on the radio, which would play when I was driving the 14 hours down to visit Coley, was What If God Was One of Us? And I really do think that is a better way to anthropomorphize the relationship we have with the divine, if a divine must exist at all. That it's not our ruler, It's not our overlord. It's not our master and us, its servants. God is our companion. And one of my favorite religions is a made-up religion that actually establishes that. The faith in Watership Down. That El Hararar is just another rabbit like every other rabbit. And is inside all rabbits. And learns from other rabbits how to be a god and protects them. And other rabbits learn from El Hararar how to be better rabbits and better people.
It's like communism for theism.
Yeah.
Communism.
All right. So I want to end this episode where we just sort of go around the round table and talk about the series as a whole, in lieu of my normal "what is the plot" bit, because the whole culmination is that the plot doesn't matter. The plot's the least important thing of it, least important part of anything that happens.
I'm about to fight with you about this, but go on. You heard that stance.
More about what it means to you. So before I do that, does anybody have anything to say about this episode?
I feel like anything I might say about this episode will probably just be wrapped up in the rest of what I have to say, so...
Yeah. I have a bit more to say about representation. And then I had a debate that I wanted to bring forward that's gonna take another 3 hours, but let's go with the representation
have 9
first.
minutes.
Yep. So,
I can go over a little bit, just so you know.
Representation first.
I'm good.
This show is gorgeous, and I loved it, and I talked with Luca a lot about it for a few days after it. It has just amazing representation and depiction, even until the end. But also I'm so upset about the end. It really does represent, to me, I was able so easily to interpret so many mental illnesses, societal issues, like personality disorders, like bulimia, anorexia, suicidality, borderline personality disorder, anxiety, social anxiety, disassociation, like all these issues, like in this show being so represented. And it was like in this way in which like it wasn't directly on the nose, but like anybody who knew it could see it and say, that's me. Like the how did I put it in our DMs? Look, I'd have to look like the vagueness of it, like the obfuscation of it, that it was depicted in this abstract way through art, style, words, like just abstraction. But anybody who dealt with that kind of shit could see that shit and be like, damn, and just be deeply stabbed by that shit. And that was me. Like, this show came for me and was like, hi, fuck you. This show is gorgeous in its representation and depiction of these issues. Like, I'm not even touching the whole of them. I'll get into it in my bonus. But the representation for having mental illnesses, for societal issues, for the onset of the internet, like of so many things, and the depiction of it, the abstraction of it in the show through art and language and everything is gorgeous. And this is a fucking phenomenal show. And I loved the show very, very much, even the end. That's why, like, in spite of what the end is saying, I'm making up a headcanon, like, just being incredibly spiteful. Like, no, the show just isn't over yet. That's all. It leaves it hanging so that you can make your own ending. And so this is the ending I'm making, but we'll get into that. But yeah, this show is really good, and this ending upset me a lot, as Luca knows. And that's why I've just gone full fuck you. I'm making a new ending in my head. It's fan fiction time. But yeah. And then the second thing, the 9-hour debate. Are y'all ready for this? If the intent of the creator is to make something that is bad, qualitatively, and it is bad, does that mean that the product is bad, if that was the intent?
So, I'm just going to start with my, like, base starting line for any question like this. And that is that objective quality is fake. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. Trying to talk about things being objectively bad or objectively good is stupid, because we have a definition. It's a thing is objectively better or worse if every single person on Earth can agree that it would be better or worse, and that will not happen with anything ever.
Someone out there likes Bubsy, unironically.
It's me.
Or even ironically. Even if it's ironic, they're still liking it.
Even if it's
still like it
ironic,
that
there's still that thread of sincerity, even in ironic liking. That's why that ironic racism often turns into full-blown racism, because there's always that thread of sincerity, even in the most ironic of like.
Good.
So for you to say, like, if somebody tries to make a bad thing on purpose and succeeds, is it bad or good? Like, well, bad or good don't exist. There's no absolute bad or good when it comes to, like, quality of media.
Bad and good
So-
bad and good are shorthand for a lot
So
of
the answer is yes and no.
Yeah. The answer is yes and no.
The answer is this is a bad question, Jenner. I'm sorry.
The creator has an intent and an understanding of what is good and what is bad. And all of us do. We still, like, yes, there is no universal understanding of good and bad. But we all have our own individual understanding of what is a good thing and what is a bad thing. And I will argue that there is some things that are understood, at least by decent people, of being absolutely bad. Like, you know, bigotry and hatred, right? There are the people who say, no, bigotry and hatred are good, actually, but we punch those people.
Really quickly, when you say bad and good, are you including a sort of the mission of this itself is kind of a ethically bad or morally bad, as well as just as artistic merit?
I think the mission was actually to upset and distress the person, like people who watch it. Mm-hmm. Like, the intent was to upset and distress people all along. The intent was to cause discomfort and to upset you. And so in that, it succeeded. So does that mean it's upsetting and distressing? I mean, to me, yes. Like, that's the point. But, like, does that mean it's bad, like, qualitatively? Does it mean it sucks?
I don't think
If the ending was intended to be a tragedy that upset you and distressed you, and it did that, then did the ending suck?
No, because there can be merit in things that I don't like, but there also can be merit in things that don't make me that make me feel bad on purpose, even if they were not intended to be something I could take merit from. If I still do so, if a person still does so, it kind of doesn't matter what they intended.
Yeah, like, for me, I feel that too many people get caught up in this idea of complete purity. That if something has a bit of flaw in it, well, now the whole thing's fucking ruined, right? You poured peas into the meal, and now the entire meal is ruined. No, just eat the peas. Like, it having a bit of shit in it doesn't make the whole thing shit. And so, like, the fact that there was a handful of things in this show that I was just like, yikes, doesn't make the whole show shit. It doesn't ruin the whole of the show. It just is flawed. And in that way, in my opinion, I appreciate the maturity of that approach. That the flaws don't ruin the entire thing. In many ways, the flaws actually are good. They make it a better property, and they leave room for improvement. For anybody who wants to make anything like this, who's inspired by it, right?
I mean, yeah, I think we've talked a lot about, like, stuff that we were not entirely sure about, and we got a lot out of talking about it.
What about you, Fefner, as a creator? If you went and said, I'm gonna write something worse than My Immortal, right? If you just opened up Google Docs right now and went, I'm gonna make just the most absolute garbage shit, and you did, and everybody on the internet said this is absolute garbage shit, did you succeed? Is it good?
Death of the author and authorial intent are both important in their own rights. If I want to make something worse than My Immortal, well, I mean, if everybody's saying it's bad, then clearly I fucked up, because, I mean, come on. My Immortal was fucking fantastic.
Yeah, My Immortal was actually good. That's my opinion, too. But that was just picking something at random, right?
Better than in source material.
Making something worse than My Inner Life.
God, what is actually... The Room. If you were to make a movie worse than The Room...
I mean, like...
Are you gonna stand The Room? We're gonna fight.
I'm not gonna stand The Room. I'm just saying, like... I've actually forgotten what I was going to say. like, like it's a dumb question because okay, what am I getting out of purposefully writing the worst thing? And if there is something legitimately for me to get out of it, then yeah, sure, I'd write it. People can say whatever they want. Again, authorial intent and death of the author are completely different.
Yep,
If I want to write garbage, I'll
Like,
do it
there's
for the learning
validity. There's
experience.
validity in garbage. I mean, look at Chuck Tingle. Like he built an entire career off of writing "quote unquote" garbage. Look at
yeah,
um, look at Robert
yeah,
V. Aldrich. Look at God, what's his name? God, the author Dean Koontz. Dean Koontz built an entire career out of writing garbage that is shit and bad.
Jenner, you don't have to like rephrase this question. I think you could have just asked like if the goal is to piss something off, is that a good goal? Like,
No, I think like does it like if it upsets you and the goal was to upset you, like does that mean that it was like a bad like a qualitatively bad property, right?
yeah,
That's the question I'm trying to breach is if the goal was if it achieved its goal, then
you don't have time to
yeah.
build up the questions. We're
Yep.
already late.
I'm sorry, I'll stop. We've had the discussion that I basically wanted to have, and it did not take 9 hours. And we basically all reached the same, I think, rough conclusion, which is it's fine. Yeah. And that's basically what I wanted to say, is that a little bit of bad in something is good, actually. And in this essay, I will.
My greater expanded take on what I said is that even most bad things have something good in them worth like getting from.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hope he doesn't do anything really shitty before I release this episode. I follow YouTuber Pan Pizza under the channel Rebel Taxi a lot, and one of the things that he is very good at is finding very, very bad, weird, stupid things and finding legitimately good parts about them.
Mm-hmm.
He had talked about two Saturday morning cartoons, the Mortal Kombat cartoon and the Darkstalkers cartoon, and he found the only good episode of Darkstalkers about Hishenko's backstory of losing her sister and trying to protect her, save her, and later avenge her. And he said, like, it was hamstrung by the animation, but the writers clearly wanted to tell a good story with this episode, and I'm glad that they tried. And similar thing with the Mortal Kombat, like some of the dialogue is fun. There are a couple like good, impactful episodes. The last episode like looks more expensive than the rest of the show combined, and that's something that I really appreciate from him is his ability to find the good qualities in bad things. It's kind of a hard talent to come by on the internet,
Yeah, I mean, this is
where
kind
everybody
of...
is more obsessed with finding the bad things and good things.
Yep, and like that, and then just like canceling them. Like for me, it's like I've actually already written. Wow, I'm a writer, folks. A big thread about this, about how we have a lot to learn from things we think we see as qualitatively bad. That we can learn from them and improve off of them to make something better. So yeah, we can learn just as much from things done poorly as we can from things done well. In fact, I would argue that we learn better from failure than we do from success. And I make that argument understanding human psychology and knowing it's a fact.
Like I said earlier, I want to end the episode with us going over like how we felt about the show as a whole, how it impacted us. Jenner, I think you already went.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say a little bit. I'll make it very short at the end. But before that, Alice, as the foremost expert on Alice, what are your opinions about Alice?
I mean, we have three other people to talk about the show
Yeah,
before we get to the ending bit.
yeah. Okay, go ahead then.
No, this is the ending bit. So
Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
I thought you already did
Oh.
this. So Alice, talk about Alice.
In the end, I'm happy that Alice seems happy. If Alice can be happy, even if it's not perfect, I can be happy about that.
If this Alice can be happy, maybe all Alices can be happy. Maybe there is hope.
You joke, but yes.
So I normally stay out of my own bit, but I do want to talk a bit about this show. This is not like a nostalgic show for me. I started watching it about a year ago at this point. Around the time that the pandemic and the lockdowns started happening in 2020. Because I had a lot more free time all of a sudden. Which, now that I was going to start using the internet a lot more, maybe not the best time to watch a show about the horrors of the internet. But, you don't know these things until you watch the show. it's hard for me to like rank it in the trilogy of weird ass animes as I keep referring to it. I feel like I have to keep saying Ava's my favorite because nobody else in my friend group will say that. But Lain is also a pretty strong contender for that, just because it embodies the weirdness so much better than Ava, and its like message of caring about humanity as a whole, I actually really like. I don't know how much like how apparent this is in the podcast, but and I always hate describing myself because I feel like I will immediately contradict myself the next time I open my mouth. I feel like I at least can be a very cynical person. Um, I feel like I'm generally friendly to people, but it can, especially when I was younger, I definitely, if somebody asked if I was a misanthrope, I probably would have said yes because I had an edgy teen period, and it wasn't the fun edgy that you can look back and laugh on. It's the edgy of like if I go back in time, first thing I'm doing is punching younger self in the face. And even though I only watched this like last year, it really helped me realize that I gotten over that. The final exchange between Yasuo and Lain of like Lain trying to talk about how she feels about humanity as a whole, and Yasuo cutting the chase and just saying you love them. It's how I like feel about humanity as a whole. Um, Being gay and growing up in the Midwest, not to throw the Midwest under the bus, like no place is good enough for um, queer people to grow up in, at least no place that I know of. But like it can be really easy to just hate faceless humanity and think that humanity as a whole is the problem, and oh, there just needs to be fewer people and shit like that.
I've been dealing with these people like chanting on Corona. Yeah, I feel ya.
Yeah, and like this and this and original Kamen Rider of all fucking things are both very heavy into like even if you don't you can't think of a single good person at this moment because like Lain cuts herself off from all of the people that she knows and like has severe issues with all of them by the end of the series. She still loves humanity as a whole. And original Kamen Rider has an episode where one of the like characters of the week sells out Kamen Rider, almost has him killed, and he still saves her at the end of the episode and he says like human life is more important than justice. Like I have to save people whether or not I think they deserve it because saving people is the most important thing I can do. I should also mention, in case you haven't realized, I really love comparative analysis because even in this, I will talk about other things at the same time. But like, this episode didn't like stop, or this show didn't stop me from becoming a misanthrope, but it helped me realize like, oh, I'm not like that anymore. I really am. I really did get better. Who'd have thunk? We normally go in a specific order, so Alice, I'll let you go next.
It's funny.
And I didn't. Sorry, I just realized I didn't make this clear. You all can talk and comment on what I'm saying. I don't want this to be a series of monologues. I would like for this to stay a conversation.
I want to.
But yeah, I know you would.
Yep, go ahead.
So yeah, if anybody wanted to comment on what I was saying but didn't,
let me make it quick.
You have a moment.
I feel that Serial Experiments Lain approaches the very sensitive issues with way more, for lack of a better word, sorry for picking this word, I can't think of a better word, maturity, than Neon Genesis Evangelion. It's way more sensitive to these issues and way more mature about them and depicts them better. And that isn't to say that it's better, but I also think Evangelion is fine. But Lain is really good.
Anna would.
It's Evangelion.
Anna would probably agree with you.
Yeah. Additionally, about you traveling back in time to punch young you, would punching young Loka have changed anything? In my opinion,
it would make present Loka feel better.
Yeah, in my opinion, it would have made past Loka worse because that's abuse. My solution to young you being an asshole is to give young you the role model he needed. To be the you, like, be the person that he needed, then to more use now. That's what I do with all of my children.
So now that I've mentioned both Kamen Rider and going back in time to punch yourself in the face, there is a very good scene with Kamen Rider Decade where he goes to see himself in the past, and past Decade says like, "Well, like, what are you gonna do to me? If I'm you, you wouldn't punch me, right?" And then it cuts to current Decade, who just has a huge smile on his face, and he hauls back and punches himself across the face. And past Decade goes, "You jackass! I'll remember this." And present Decade goes, "Yeah, you will."
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I want to. My next thing is you pointed out that Lain disconnects herself from everybody, but she still loves humanity as a whole. That's how I feel too. And I wanted to point something out. Even without everybody there in that wherever, that void, she's still there. I hope she can learn to love herself one day. Let's all love Lain. Anyway, Alice, your turn.
It's funny that mine actually end up inadvertently kind of being kind of tied with yours because it's funny to me that what you got out of it was kind of Lane's love of humanity, because what really spoke to me was it felt like the show Serial Experiments Lain understood what it is like to be omniparanoid and to be a kind of hypervigilance that is almost totalizing, especially in the early episodes. And it was weirdly nice. Doesn't seem like quite the right term, but it was kind of nice to see someone get that, to understand that feeling of the absolute sort of having your own personal AT field. No one in the universe makes sense. Everyone is a kind of an almost difficulty understanding other people as minds that are separate from your own. That it almost seemed like the show felt like that concept was terrifying, and it was weirdly gratifying for me. Like, finally somebody gets what that feels like. Somebody gets what it feels like to be really hypervigilant and paranoid and feel distinctly uncomfortable in the presence of other human beings as a default. But interesting, I don't think that there's really a tension between our two takeaways there, because at the same time that the show Serial Experiments Lain finds people uncomfortable, it also reaffirms their value. Lain is very alone, and the show is very paranoid about everyone around her, but it's also like very willing to show us that they're just people, and
Yeah, I
that's
think like
a good thing.
I would say like I would say this disgusting mass of like misery and mistakes is my disgusting mass of misery and mistakes. I think it's like, fuck you, I'm gonna love it. Like, this is mine. I think, not to put words in your mouth, but I kind of got that vibe. Is I hate them, but they're mine, right?
Yeah, a little bit. No, I mean that is kind of the feeling, honestly, that like the tension between being afraid of and distrustful and entirely of other minds, but also thinking that they might valuing them anyway.
Defner, your turn.
Okay, so I'm just going to get the potential joke I think somebody would think of out of the way. The real serial experiments is the lanes we made along the way. But no, seriously, like,
And
in the beginning, we were talking about, like, oh, what's serial experiments refer to? Is it just going to be like a monster of the week, except instead of monsters, we get weird things for every episode? No, that's not it at all. Serial experiments Lain is just Lain experimenting, trying to be human. We don't really have an origin point for Lain, and there's like one scene that takes place before the show involving Lain, the one flashback with Chisa. I think that's it. But for the most part, like, the show just kind of begins when it's the most convenient for it to begin. And is Lain just kind of on her own, not really understanding the world. And throughout the show, I feel like a lot of... like, it remains weird throughout, but it kind of changes the way it is weird. Like, at the start, you just have this constant sort of disassociation from Lane's point of view, where people just vanish all of a sudden, stuff like that. And then later on, I feel like it's just the rest of the world that just gets kind of weird, and not in even necessarily in a disassociating way. But it is just sort of constantly shifting as Lain learns more and more. And sort of like, her computer room is sort of a place of isolation, but it actually grows alongside her understanding, I think. Even if Lane's not really the type of person who shows that sort of thing outwardly, you know, she grows closer to people, definitely, but maybe not visually as much as... Okay, how do I phrase this? Like, I think the bonds she gets are stronger than what we really see on screen. The amount that she sort of comes to care. And that just sort of continues until there's this jackass manifesting himself as God. And he's just constantly in the way. And that's one of the two catalysts that eventually leads Lain to severing with most of reality. I feel like that's the more, like, present threat, and I think that on its own, I wouldn't have liked the ending as much if that's the only thing that, you know, eventually led Lain to that point where she had to sever, is somebody else getting in the way. And just saying, aha, I'm here now. But I think the other sticking point is what we've been talking about, this sort of, you know, as much as Lain wants to be with everybody else on their level, you know, either she can't or she won't. And I think that's most notable in the two scenes where Alice gets, you know, spied on by Lain. Either normal Lain or horrifying alien Lain. Like, that just happens, and it is Lain doing it, but it is also not Lain doing it. What we sort of understand to be the main Lain doesn't want that, but she has to deal with the repercussions of it, because it is still her. In this weird existence she lives in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
I don't
yeah,
have
like,
much to counterpoints with Fefner. I'm just nodding in agreement with Fefner.
but yeah, like,
Yeah, same here.
when we were actually watching the episode, we almost immediately were like, hey, this is reminding us of Madoka.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
fucking forgot to talk about Madoka. God damn it.
don't worry, I'm here. So,
Thank
yeah,
you,
like,
Fefner.
the thing about Madoka is, I'm just going to keep talking as if anybody in the audience knows exactly how Madoka, you know, pans out. If you don't,
Yeah,
you should probably
spoilers
go
for
watch
Madoka,
it.
sorry.
It's a tough watch, but it is worth it. Just only watch the original Madoka, none of the remakes or none of the sequels.
And remember,
It made me
being
only watch it
Maguka,
once.
being Maguka is suffering.
Yeah, being Maguka is suffering.
But yeah, like, the end of Madoka is, you know, she sacrifices herself,
Spoilers
To save all-
for
I already made the joke.
Go ahead, go ahead.
to save all of the other magical girls, and throughout a very tough-to-watch, painful series, even though there is this twinge of sadness to the moment, it's also this very, like, uplifting and powerful moment where she does have the strength to just even while erasing herself, make everybody's lives better through the action. And Lain is more like, what if that was all just sad, though? What if it was all just sad?
Yeah.
I think, like, I think there is some happiness to the ending, like, seeing Lain and Alice at the end. That part of it's sort of happy, that sort of familiarity that they have, even when one of them doesn't have the proper memories. But, like, the rest of it is kind of... It is a tragedy, because it is a character who cannot overcome their flaws to get a perfect ending for themselves. Lane's case, she can't... I think she can't really overcome either being God or being human. She cannot shed godhood, or cannot shed godhood or whatever, enough to
Currently.
only be a human. But, like, the other Lain, who is, not necessarily correct, but brings up some of her fears, like, hey, when you're a god, nobody can really... Nobody's going to hate you. And, Jenner, I know, had a problem with that particular line, but, like, what she's saying there is, like, she's getting to the difficulty of Lain being human, which is she is very sensitive to the feelings of others and has a hard time when people hate her.
Mm-hmm.
And I would definitely say the strong emotion of hate. I think when people, were just like, whatever, mildly disliking of her, Lain was fine with that. It's more like when, again, going back to the other Lain stalking Alice thing, when that happened and Alice lost her trust in Lain, that's when Lain just hit the reset button. He was like, nope. And like, again, in this episode, what caused her to hit the huge reset button this time was Alice just kind of getting a mental breakdown at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Finally experiencing all of the Wired. And just not having any feeling anymore, which was also bad, and Lain did not like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing about Lain, is we don't know exactly how her godhood works, but, like, she is very much associated with the Wired, which is just the exchanging and movement of information. That's Lain. Lain is this person who is in constant flux and exists in many minds and loves all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So she is always close to them, but can't get personally close. At least not anymore.
Yeah.
But,
At least currently, I would say at this point, yes.
but yeah, the whole thing about memories, and the part Jenner got mad about, is, I think that in itself is the wrong part of, the show talking. The show can say things, and, that doesn't have to be the thing it means. In the end, there are a few things that sort of hint that, complete removal of memories does not mean it doesn't actually exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, there's the line she says at the end, so memories aren't only of the past, are they? They can be of right now or even tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Memories are a thing that exists in a lot of places. And then there's also the scene at the end where, even though Alice does not know Lain, she can, like, it's still on the tip of her tongue. There's a vague familiarity with Lain, even though she has no actual memories.
High up the street. Sorry.
So, what Alice said, right after the reset is wrong, because even without those memories, Lain still exists. And we can tell that because even though Lain has severed herself and isn't doing, like, the appearing naked in the sky thing anymore, she is still ever present. She still appears on the screen. both in the email within the episode and also, as I alluded to earlier, in the intro. One of the major parts of the intro is just people doing their thing, going about their day, and Lain is just on a screen, sort of yelling at them,
Yeah.
talking, doing something.
She's there.
Yep. Even if you don't acknowledge her, Lain is always there.
As I said at the beginning of this episode, you're not a Schrodinger's cat. You, yes, you, the girl reading this right now. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's just my overall thoughts on Serial Experiments Lain. It is Lain giving it her best shot, just really trying.
I'll make mine quick.
He tried so hard and got
No.
so far, but
No.
in the end, it didn't really
No,
matter.
it totally
did,
mattered.
though.
It does. It did matter. It mattered to the starfish.
Are you telling me that Linkin Park was wrong about
Yes.
something?
I
Who'd have
mean-
thought?
Maybe they were right in their own situation. I don't know what they were dealing with.
My favorite Linkin Park song is Somewhere I Belong. So I would recommend you listen to it.
Yeah, I will.
Alright, so it's my turn. I'll try to make this quick. Give me 3 minutes. Here we go. It might take
you'll
longer,
take
by
a
the way.
nap?
Yep.
Uh,
I've talked a lot about the depiction of being suicidal that is in this show. Of how surviving suicide and having suicidality yourself is a big part of this show. And I've already talked about how I'm like that too. I can't and won't speak for all people like this. But for me, there were moments in my past, and there are still moments even now, and there will be moments in the future, unfortunately, where I really did believe that the world and everybody I knew, and even people I didn't, would be better off if I were dead. If I'd never existed. And I've spent so much time wishing I never was, or that I had, died a long time ago. And to have had that, explicitly stated as absolutely true in this show, that everybody is much better off, upset me a lot. But, just like Fefner said, I will reiterate, Lain is not gone. She's still there. They are fine, and she's still there. She's remembered, she's in the computers. I've said this before, but being hurtful to other people, being abusive or exploitative or whatever, it hurts you too. And it can be really hard to deal with the consequences of those actions, to even bear with the reality that you did those things. And gosh, there sure will be a lot of consequences for everything that Lain has done. So if you're God, your godlike sins have godlike consequences, right? But our first instinct might be to go into denial, to try and run away from it. And then maybe get angry at it, right? And then maybe bargain with it. And do you notice how I'm reciting all the stages of grief? Eventually, you just have to accept it. Lain will get there. She's just in the denial part, right? I actually griped to the two of you, Luca and Fefner, a little bit ago, about how I recognize that I love unconditionally, and how sometimes I just don't feel loved back. And I think that's another thing that's kind of explored in the show. How Lain loves all of humanity unconditionally, and she says so, confirms as such, pretty bluntly there in the show. And I think unrequited love is one of the themes in this show. So, Lain loves all of humanity. That includes us, by the way. Unless any of you have been hiding something from me. Would you all say that you also love Lain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just me? Okay.
No, yeah, what the hell, you two?
I also said yes.
I didn't hear
I
it.
don't
Oh,
think
sorry.
I'm muted.
The mic didn't pick it up. I'm
I
sorry.
pushed
Yeah.
shift instead of control, and I'm sorry. I'm embarrassed.
Do you love Lain?
I do, in fact, love Lain.
I love
And
you.
I think that all of us can love Lain, a lot because we watched the show, so we have the strongest memories of her.
Yeah, I love Lain too. I love you, Lain. That's one part of what I was going to say. The final thing I was going to say is a quote from a big post I wrote many months ago about creation. Most of us have heard the tale of the clown Pagliacci, who can make anybody smile and feel better, and how a doctor recommended a sad, traumatized, suffering, and grieving client go to see Pagliacci, only for that client to reply in English that they are Pagliacci. And Pagliacci just needs to realize that they can and should be Pagliacci too, for and with themselves as well. And I felt a lot of mixed feelings watching this show, because I felt so spoken to by this show, not spoken for. And I was comforted with that undeniable knowledge that I wasn't alone. But I was also so anguished by that revelation that I wasn't alone, because nobody should have gone through what I did. And when people say representation matters, is it because they'd like to see themselves in the work? I wonder sometimes if they mean it as deeply as I just did, because this mattered so much to me. That feeling of seeing someone with your skin tone, your sexuality, your identity, your marginalizations going through same enough kind of shit that you're going through or went through. To me, I think that's speaking to you on a spiritual level. Or at least that's how it spoke to me. I loved this show. Let's all love Lain.
Right. I think that does it for this episode and for the show.
Let's all love Lain.